2 weeks from tonight. 2 weeks from tonight, the NFL draft will finally hit us. We will find out where Jeremiah Love is going. We will find out who the number one wide receiver is going. We will find out whether Eli Stowers gets round one draft capital. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be great. But the bad news is we have to wait 2 weeks for this to happen. In good news, you have FFPC Insider Access tonight for you for 2 straight hours with a special guest co-host who I'll get to in a second. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to help you sort through everything you need to know for your rookie dynasty drafts, everything going on from an FFPC fantasy football standpoint, and everything going on from like whatever you're doing with fantasy football right now. Best ball, dynasty, what have you, we're going to help you through it. My name is Eric Balkman. You can connect with me on the X at Eric Balkman. Of course, you know me from the RotoViz High Stakes Slowdown, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, Extra Reps, the spinoff of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour podcast. And I'm pleased to welcome in my guest co-host. I'll tell you what, before I bring him in tonight, because he deserves a good introduction, I want to remind everybody that if you're looking to play fantasy football year-round, check out the Fantasy Football Players Championship, Dynasty and Empire Dynasty Orphans for as little as $1. MyFFPC.com is where to go for those. We are underneath the 500 orphan mark. So we have fewer than 500 orphans left. We probably sold about 4,000 so far. So time's running out if you want to grab an orphan. It's the quickest way to fantasy goodness, fantasy championships by picking up an orphan right now. The Never Too Early Best Ball tournaments are going on right now, both in the classic and super flex version. $125 and $35 to join respectively. $40,000 and $10,000 grand prizes await you there. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. And of course, don't forget about the big gorilla and the baby gorilla. The big gorilla features a $1 million grand prize, $350 entry fee. The 7 bananas and the early rampage promos are going on right now. And of course, the baby gorilla, if you always want to play high stakes fantasy football, but the barrier to entry was too big or what have you, $125 gets you eligible for a $100,000 grand prize. Sign up now, register now, play now, draft now. MyFFPC.com, MyFFPC.com. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and get notified each and every time we go live, and I'll give you the update on what's going on with that. As far as our live shows next week, I'll give you an update on that at the end of the show. With that, I want to bring in my guest co-host tonight. He has been a staff member over at Footballguys for as long as I can remember. He is the host of the Auction Brief podcast. He is an auction draft expert, the inventor of par sheets, and a 3-time, not 1-time, not 2-time, 3-time Kings Classic auction champion and practicing defense attorney to the stars. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome in the guy you can follow along with at X at Drew Davenport FF. He is the incomparable Drew Davenport. Welcome in tonight, sir.
Thank you for that introduction. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. It's exciting to have you on. I always wondered, well, number one, I'll be honest with you. I was hoping this Rashee Rice thing was not resolved, and so we could have a great discussion on this. But you nailed it, and we'll get to how right you were on this coming up in the second segment tonight. Well, what's your life like when it comes to like being a defense attorney, and then obviously having this expertise in fantasy football, especially for auctions or whatever? What's your life like? You're in the courtroom all day, and then you come home and you grind fantasy at night, Drew? What is this?
It's not easy. I got to be honest. I got 2 kids, 11 and 9 years old. So, doing the whole dad thing, coaching soccer, having to be an attorney during the day. I will say this, my job, while it's probably the most stressful thing I can think of while I'm at court, when I'm not in court, I do have a lot of flexibility to think about fantasy football and that kind of thing. So it is nice that I have that, or else I probably wouldn't be able to do the job. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of grinding at night, especially when you get into June, July, and August. Everybody needs the time, and it's not easy. I fit in naps in the middle of the day. I burn the candle at both ends. I try not to tweet when I'm in the courtroom waiting on my cases to be called. But hey, those are the key months, the June, July, and August. I'm mainly a draft guy. I do work during the season, but those draft months, those 3 months are some of the craziest months that I've ever experienced really in my life as far as being busy. Just how it goes, but I love it.
Which is good. I mean, we all want to love what we do. The other thing I want to ask you, I'm a big, like, I don't care if it's comedy or drama or whatever. I'm a sucker for courtroom stuff. So like A Few Good Men, yes. Runaway Jury, yes. Anytime I get an SNL, a Saturday Night Live like courtroom sketch, I'm all about that or whatever. For your standpoint, a guy who lives and breathes this stuff, do you have a favorite go-to, whether it's comedy, whether it's drama, as far as like pop culture versions of the courtroom? Is there something that you really hold near and dear to your heart that you really like?
Well, I don't want to disappoint you, but I cannot stand courtroom stuff.
Really?
Yeah, I don't. It's one of those things where there's too many other factors that surround that that takes me out of the moment. The biggest one is, of course, that nobody ever gets the stuff in the courtroom accurate. It's like
Right.
every time there's a case in a TV show or movie, the gallery's always full. That stuff always bugs me. Like there's never anybody in court when I'm there. There's like 3 people there. They say stuff that's just clearly not accurate, and it's clearly written by people who don't practice law.
Okay.
And on top of that, the other thing that takes me out of the moment is I'll be watching a case and somebody will do something or say something, and then it'll spur a memory of a case I have going on. And then I'll start thinking about, okay, well, yeah, that's right. I got to make sure I got to get that video. The case is in 2 weeks. I got to schedule the client conference for next week. It just takes me out of the moment. Now, having said that, there are things that I find extremely entertaining that are legal related. You mentioned A Few Good Men. That's just a classic movie. Love that kind of stuff. I'm interested in that. Comedy stuff is right up my alley too. So I enjoy that kind of thing. But in general, I just don't seek that stuff out. It'd be like, I think, a doctor like watching The Pit, on
Yeah.
HBO. I enjoyed The Pit, but I don't do that every day. So that's kind of where I'm at. But comedy is right up my alley. So I think if I had to answer that, that would be my answer.
So, like, the first thing I think of, Drew, Liar Liar with Jim Carrey. Was that a guilty pleasure for you?
Oh, absolutely. Love Liar Liar, because one of the best lines in the movie, I don't know if I can cuss on this show,
Yeah, go ahead.
but I mean, the line that we as public defenders say to each other, which is funny, is when he picks up the phone and they're like, "Hey, so-and-so's calling. He wants to know he's in trouble. What should he do?" And he grabs the phone and says, "Stop breaking the law, asshole," and then hangs up on him. And that's my life every day, because there are a lot of people out there. I'd say 98% of my clients, they're not criminals, so to speak. They just make dumb decisions on a daily basis. And I have to like tell them, like, hey, stop making these decisions. You won't be seeing me. That's a good thing. So I feel like saying that, like when they walk in and be like, well, what can we do? And I'll be like, well, you could stop, drinking and driving. I guess that's maybe that's an option. So love Liar Liar. And also the other best part of that movie that I think is funny is when he gets his car towed and there's like a scratch on the car, and he's like, that wasn't there when I gave, when you towed my car. And they say, what are you going to do about it? And he's like, absolutely nothing, because if I did sue you, it would just tie up an entire day of my life. I probably wouldn't be able to collect the judgment anyway. So it's really just going to end up draining hours of my life for no benefit. So I'm going to do nothing. And that's pretty darn good. That's because that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
In small claims court, you sue somebody, may not even be solvent. You get a $3,000 judgment. They don't pay you. What'd you do except waste money on court fees and waste time in court? So love Liar Liar. That's a good one.
I think back to I don't know if you're a King of Queens guy, but Leah Remini obviously played a legal secretary on that show. And there was an episode where they were upset with their neighbors building this fence and then this pool or whatever, and she was going to sue them. And then she brings this up to her boss. I might be mixing up episodes because there's so many good ones. But her boss tells the story of this pizza oven that his wife had to have installed, and it took forever to install it or whatever, and it never got installed. And by the time he took him to court and everything, and he finally won the judgment or whatever it was for the pizza oven, but it was like years later, and his wife was on a low carb diet at that point. Right. There was nothing to be gained.
Perfect. Perfect.
It was awful. Like it was perfect for us as the viewer and awful for how it turned out for him. Anyway, the last thing I'll say about legalese here, I'm a big fan of Better Call Saul. Did you watch that show at all, or Breaking
Yeah.
Bad, the Breaking Bad universe? Your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
So Breaking Bad was really tangential to any legal stuff, but yeah, Better Call Saul. It's kind of funny. There's a guy in my office. Him and I are about the same age. We've been doing this a long time, and the name Saul Goodman is just too good because me and him will see each other in the hall and be like, Saul Good, man. Because I mean, when you've been doing this 21 years, like that's all you can do. It's just like, I can help you. There's only so much I can do, but in the end, it's all good, man. So I love Better Call Saul. I think a lot of that stuff was more accurate. And I will say that I think you could tell there was like some legal consultation on that stuff.
Right.
And that stuff's not my area of expertise. I mean, there's some criminal stuff in there, but a lot of what they were doing with the nursing homes and like the class action and all that stuff, that's not up my alley. So that's actually a good point. It's like I could watch that because I don't know what they're screwing up in the class action stuff. That's not my stuff. So I love Better Call Saul. It's one of my favorite shows of all time.
Yeah, it's a great one, and I have no legal experience, but it is still like a top 10, easily top 10 show for me, maybe top 5 when we go back and look at it. Drew, this is so much fun to kick things off, and I wanted to get the legal experience here for everybody tuning in early because there is going to be a section where we talk about off the field stuff for NFL guys, which I know you have been nailing over the course of not only this year but in previous years as well. But it's not going to be as big as I hope tonight, so I definitely wanted to focus in on the courtroom stuff early on in the show. Coming up on FFPC Insider Access tonight, Drew Davenport from Footballguys and I will go around the NFL talking about all the stuff that you need to know for the veterans and the rookies as we are 2 weeks away from the NFL draft tonight. In the second segment, we're going to go over Drew Davenport's mock draft with Footballguys that he did within the last week or so, and we'll talk about some of the picks that he made on that. We will get into Puka Nacua, Jordan Addison, Stefon Diggs, the off-field stuff that they have going on right now and how you need to be adapting your FFPC or just fantasy football in general strategy based on what's going on with those guys. And then we will go to the rookie spotlight in the final segment. And Drew, I don't know if you noticed this, I have a heavy Indiana Hoosier presence in the final show tonight because I know that's your alma mater. And this is fantastic that they come up with one of the greatest college football, maybe the greatest college football season of all time. And they have these guys, Mendoza, Cooper, Surratt. We're going to get into Kalen Black as well in the draft tonight, or in the rookie draft that will be coming up here with people playing in Dynasty Fantasy Football. I want to get your thoughts on those guys, as well as some other rookies, including but not limited to Lemon, Sadiq, Boston, and much more. Without further ado, Drew, let's go to the Big Apple and kick things off with Malik Nabers. John Harbaugh, the new head coach for the New York Giants, said that Nabers is going to be in training camp and closer to the season is when he's going to be active or when he's going to be, kind of full steam ahead or whatever, getting back on the field and being healthy and making big plays, putting up big numbers for fantasy footballers and the New York Giants. My question to you is this. For the majority of this offseason, we have not heard a whole lot about Nabers. We have not heard a whole lot about how this recovery is going. What we did hear was he had to have this extra surgery. This was a couple of months or so ago now, which is not great. And my thing too is with this, even how good medical science has come, we have seen players coming off the torn ACL. It kind of takes a full season. And then the following season, we see them back to, 95% or even 100% of the player they were prior to the ACL tear. My level of concern with Nabers is probably higher than most right now. I don't know how you feel about this, but when you talk about Nabers coming into a situation where he basically had a quarter, maybe a quarter and a half of catching passes from Jackson Dart last year. And now we have a new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new offense, as well. When you think about Malik Nabers this year, is this a player that you're willing to pay the iron price for, or are you letting somebody else take him knowing that he's recovering from this knee injury and he's coming back into a situation that wasn't there in 2025?
I think we're actually in line with this idea, Eric, because I'm with you on the fact that you said I'm probably lower than most on Nabers right now. I got to be honest, I'm right there with you. So I don't know. I don't know that you and I are out of line in that respect. I know that in the recent Footballguys Mock, he went late second. That's about right. That's where he's going right now in most places that I'm seeing. He's wide receiver 8 in ADP, according to Footballguys, right around that neighborhood. Kind of doesn't matter, but low, mid to low end wide receiver 1 territory. I'm just not there for him. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the idea that the second surgery, the meniscus is something that adds a complicating factor to the ACL issue. And when I remember hearing initially about the Neighbors injury, that it was non-standard. It's not like it's something they haven't seen before, but you get my point. It wasn't just a typical pop the ACL, go and repair 9 to 10 months, you're back. So I had heard that initially. Nothing I've heard since then has dispelled that idea. And again, I'm talking about an injury thing here. I'm not an injury guy. I follow a lot of smart injury guys on Twitter, and that's where I'm getting my information. So I'm just trying to say that I have significant doubt about his ability to perform the entire season. And one of the things that we tend to forget, the forest for the trees kind of thing, when we're in the middle of all this stuff, is we're going to see a lot of him running around and, oh, look, he's cutting and he looks good and he got into camp on time. And the thing that you can't forget is that we're going to double and triple count all the positive vibes when we get into training camp. It's like we're going to see him and go, wow, that's great. And he's going to catch a pass. We're going to go, wow, that's great. And then all of the positive buzz, he's not going to be late second round. I mean, can you imagine sitting there at 23 thinking you're going to get Malik Neighbors at the end of August if he's been in training camp? There's just no way. So that's going to creep up. I'm not even really in on him late second. If I could get him in the third, I'd feel happy about it. I'd be fine with that. But even that, it's one of those things that time and time again, and this is an experience thing. I talk about this with my buddy Brian Drake all the time. There's an experience factor with fantasy football that there's a lot of young guys coming up or gals coming up in the industry that don't have the experience to see some of this stuff. And it takes years to learn these lessons. Like, you have seen it before, Eric. I don't know. You're younger than me, but you look like you're not a 22-year-old anymore. Is that right? So you're with me on this idea that we have seen this play before. Mm-hmm. And Neighbors is one of those guys that, it's so tantalizing. Like, early third round. Oh, I've already got a running back and a wide receiver. How fun would it be early third round to take him? Okay, well, let's spin that out and see how that goes. There will be bust or boom moments because he's that good of a player, but he's also one of those guys that's just going to sit on your roster that's going to frustrate you because a lot of times there's secondary injuries, or he just isn't the player we thought he was, or maybe the hardball scheme. There's just all these little things that are working against him. And the problem with drafting him that early is that's not just a guy that you're going to be like, okay, well, I can bench him for a while. But this got to be a cornerstone of your team.
Yeah.
And if you're in a 10-teamer, okay, maybe you take a chance on him and you can find some production while he gets it together. But are you really wanting to roll into the season with Malik Neighbors and count on it? And one of the things that we always talk about is just because they play through it, doesn't mean they're going to be who we want them to be. And you have to keep running them out there, right? You can't bench him. You just got to keep putting him out there. And so it almost becomes one of those things where it's like, I don't want to say he's off my board because that's stupid, but do I want him in the early third? Yeah, I'd be happier with that. It's a better price, but do I really want that? And do I want that hassle all season long? So anyway, we're going to be here till 11:30 if every answer is this long. let me just say, I'm out right now on Neighbors. I'll see you later in the summer, but I'm out right now.
So this is going to lead me into a nice would you rather here. We'll play a would you rather. You're right. 211 is the FFPC never too early best ball ADP for Neighbors right now. So late second round, just like you said. Let me do a quick would you rather on this. Drew, you tell me who you would rather take at the the late second, early third round. Would you rather have Drake London or Malik Neighbors?
London easily.
Neighbors or Pickens?
Ooh. Yeesh, that's a tough one. Slightly Pickens, slightly.
Okay. Neighbors or Nico Collins?
I'll take Nico.
Okay, and then we'll get into this more later on. But Neighbors or Rashee Rice?
Ooh, I'll still take Rice. I'll take Rice.
I was just going to say, if it helps you out at all, I'm taking Rice over Neighbors at that point.
Yeah.
Now we're deeping down a little bit, and maybe we'll get the Neighbors response here. Neighbors or Chris Olave?
So I'd take a shot on Neighbors there.
And then the last one, no, I'll do two more. Neighbors or AJ Brown, because this will be fun.
Neighbors for sure.
And then Neighbors or Teteroa McMillan.
Neighbors.
Oh boy, it's close with that one.
It's close. It's close.
Yeah,
those are good ones because
no, and that's kind of the neighborhood of where he's going right now, because McMillan is going at the end of the third round. So technically, you wouldn't have to make that decision in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament. Well, I mean, maybe you could, but you'd be overdrafting McMillan if you chose to take him over Neighbors. So I totally get it in regards to that. Neighbors is an interesting guy. I love the player, but when you consider, Drew, I'm always nervous about this kind of stuff. Not only is he coming off the injury, let's throw that out of the equation. It's basically a brand new quarterback. It's definitely a new OC, a new head coach. There's a lot of newness to this. And while I have seen wide receivers thrive in this situation before, Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, when they went to new teams, they didn't miss a beat. We've seen a lot of other wide receivers go to new teams, new offenses, new quarterbacks, and not be all that great. So that's another thing that's concerning. Forget the injury. So there's a lot of stuff going on with Malik Neighbors here right now.
Yeah. If I could just say one more thing. Every time you add one of those things that you just mentioned, I always think of it like a mental calculus. Like, okay, here's what I want to see with the production from a guy like Neighbors. And every time you add a barrier, it gets like you get further away from being able to get here. It doesn't mean you can't get here. It just means that every time you add one of those things, it's another thing you got to step over to get to that production. And every time you add one of those impediments, it makes it that much harder. It makes it that much riskier, especially early rounds like this. In the second round, I don't like to sign up for that risk.
I was listening to the Risers and Fallers podcast on the Player Profiler Network earlier today, and Pete Nova, kind of like what you were just saying, Drew, he equated it to this woman who's had all these different plastic surgeries, right? The tummy tuck, the lip, the breast endowment, the lip, whatever they call it or whatever, the facelift where they're tightening everything. Like, it's just all these, he was talking about DK Metcalf, but he was talking about all these things that like add up. And it's just like, at what point do we say, you know what? Give me Drake London, and give me Teteroa McMillan, or give me, Rice or whoever it is, because you're not dealing with all this stuff with Neighbors. And it stinks because I love Neighbors, as like I have him on a bunch of my dynasty teams. I love him, but at the same point, I have to be a realist and figure out, what I need to be doing for the 2026 season.
Absolutely.
Moving on to tight end, Drew. Kyle Pitts has signed his franchise tag. He has shown up for OTAs with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, they could still negotiate a long-term deal. That's certainly not like they can't, there's still a possibility that both sides are on the same page. They want to get locked up with Pitts in Atlanta. But we know as of right now, it is a 1-year, $15+ million deal. Pitts is interesting, dude. He's been interesting every single year in this league, coming back from when he was this athletic wunderkind, basically coming out of the University of Florida into the NFL, and kind of set the world on fire with his first rookie year, or with his rookie year, first year in the league. It was awesome. And then it's been kind of like, he hasn't hit the thresholds that I think a lot of people were hoping he would hit based on what he did in that rookie year. Last year was awesome, arguably his best season in the NFL. What do you make not only of Kyle Pitts, what he's going to do this year, Drew, but considering that he's got a new head coach, new offensive coordinator, and probably a new quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa?
Boy, it's another one of those things where we got a ton of moving parts, and I always like that stuff makes me nervous, and I shy away from all the moving parts. Now, I see right now, again, Footballguys ADP says right around tight end 6-ish territory. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that price. And if there was nothing else on the board that I was excited about, I could see taking Pitts there. But my problem is, again, and I was very intimately familiar with this because in the playoffs in a couple of my bigger leagues, I was against Kyle Pitts in the playoffs. And I watched him do kind of the thing that he does, which is to disappoint people when they really need him. And what it comes down to for me is I saw something the other day and I couldn't find it before we came on the air. I was looking for it, but somebody had done some splits with Drake London off the field versus on the field, and it wasn't pretty for Kyle Pitts to see those splits. So that makes me nervous. The quarterback situation also makes me nervous. And it's not that I don't think either one of these guys can keep the offense relevant, because I do think they can. I think they're good enough. I don't like either one of them as quarterback, in a vacuum. But as far as allowing the Falcons offense to be productive, I think they're fine for that purpose. So I'm not going to dig in too much for that. But again, we're talking about every time you set up a hurdle, the more difficult it gets.
Right.
I'm just not a Pitts guy. And I just don't know that, absent some sort of obvious pivot to making him more of a focal point, I don't want him with Drake London around. I'd much rather have, and we're going to talk about him in a minute, I'd much rather have the guy going right after him in Green Bay.
Yeah, I think that, and it's wild because Kraft is right next to Pitts in ADP right now in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament. You're looking at tight end 6, tight end 7 between those guys. It varies so much in drafts, and I think this is interesting, Drew, with Kraft, because I've been bringing this up maybe because I'm a glutton for punishment. I was at the game at Lambeau Field when Kraft tore his ACL.
Ooh.
Against the Carolina Panthers. And I felt bad about that because I thought I was the jinx. I'm wearing my Packers gear tonight or whatever, but I feel like I was the jinx for that. I was with my brother and his sons, and we're getting food at halftime, and the line is long. And then we're hearing, on the TVs and the overhead speaker that Kraft is down. And I'm like, my God, this is the one guy that this Packers offense can't lose, and lose him they did with the torn ACL. Brian Gutekunst talked to the media this past week saying that Kraft is making good progress. I don't know, and maybe this is like the way that Kraft wins. Maybe I should be more concerned about him in 2026 coming off this ACL, but I feel like I'm a little bit less concerned because of how integral he was in this Packers offense, and the fact that he was the tight end 1 at the point where he got hurt last year. He was absolutely crushing it. And now you get this discount of being able to grab the tight end 1 at the point he tore his ACL last year. You can get him in the mid-5th round of FFPC tight end premium drafts. So, Drew, I have to ask you on this, are you buying into Kraft, or are you, again, coming off the ACL tear? I know the offense is basically the same. There's not a whole lot else going on with Kraft. It's not like he has other tight end targets. If anything, Dobbs has moved on to New England, so there should be extra targets that he might see this year with Jordan Love. But how do you feel about Tucker Kraft coming into the 2026 season, coming off this knee ligament tear?
Well, the first thing I'd go back to is when he went down, I know there was some optimism for Luke Musgrave. And I certainly paid up in the Kings Classic. Didn't turn out to work, but players are such a premium there. Whenever a tight end who might be starting comes on the market, people go nuts. And I did. So I think we found an answer there, though, that Musgrave's not going to threaten Tucker Kraft whatsoever. And so you bring up my first point astutely, which is there's not a lot of competition there, first of all, from the tight end room, but also they lose Romeo Dobbs. And I know that Tucker Kraft is the kind of guy that he's a little bit frustrating to have, because as a fantasy player, you want that consistent production. And he has those weeks where, he's got 2 for 31, and that's frustrating. But the guy is, in my opinion, if he finishes out the season, we're talking about the guy like we are Trey McBride and Brock Bowers. We're having that conversation right now. If he finishes doing anything like what he started out to do before he got hurt. So I just think that I'm taking the chance here. And the difference between him and Neighbors is there's a couple things. Number one is I don't believe there was a meniscus issue with Kraft. I think his was fairly straightforward. And the second thing is, playing tight end and catching passes as a tight end is vastly different than the gifts that Malik Neighbors has. And I'm not saying that Tucker Kraft is not an athletic guy that relies on that. But there is a difference between the explosiveness required to do Malik Neighbors things than to do Tucker Kraft things. So I think that the complicating factors shrink for me with Kraft. If he looks good in training camp and he doesn't pick up secondary hamstring, groin, stuff like that, that we know can develop off of the ACL, then I'm all in. The problem is that price is going to continue to rise, just like Neighbors. We see this. I'd be shocked if he's not tight end 4 by the time we get to the end of redraft season.
So that leads me into my final question on Kraft here, Drew. He's tight end 6 right now, or tight end 7, depending upon how you look at it, mid-5th round. If you are drafting right now in early April, is that a price that you want to be in business with Kraft, knowing, as you just said, that his ADP is probably going to rise? Or would you still say like that's too high for a guy coming off the torn ACL in a Packers offense that, really had the last couple of years has been, let's run and take the ball out of Jordan Love's hands. How do you handle, what's the proper way that you would tell fantasy players right now to handle Tucker Kraft at that mid-5th round as tight end 6?
I think it's a completely fine price. And when I say fine, it's really me saying, I'm not excited about it, but I'm okay with it. I think it's reasonably priced. I would look at the guys ahead of him more than I look at his price right now, just because I don't know that I care too much about. It looks like Pitts is ahead of him, maybe Fannin. We're talking about those couple of guys. I'm easily in on Kraft at his price right now ahead of those 2 guys. I love Harold Fannin. I just don't love the situation, and same with Kyle Pitts.
The Pitts and Kraft basically right next to each other in that mid to late 5th round in FFPC tight end premium leagues. If you want to look above that, you got to go up to the mid 4th, early 4th. That's where Warren and Fannin are going as the tight end 4, tight end 5. And then above that, then you get the elites at that 2-3 turn, Colston Loveland in the 1st round, Bowers and McBride, obviously. So that's where Kraft is sort of landing in tight end premium drafts right now.
Yeah, and Fannin, I don't disagree with the general idea here. But if you're asking me, do I want those guys, around the 4 area versus Kraft and 5, absolutely would rather have Kraft. In fact, if you put them next to each other, I probably would rather take Kraft straight up anyway. I'm just not as concerned about the injury, and I'm not as concerned about like I said, I'd be shocked if he's not tight end 4 or 5 by the end of redraft season, and that feels great for me.
Yeah.
If he starts creeping up even further, and if I'm having to and I'm talking say non-tight end premium, if you're going and you're having to reach up into the 4th round or whatever just to make sure you get him, because we get this hysteria. Again, it's like a double counting thing. We get this hysteria, look what Kraft did before he got hurt. Now he's running routes. He's great. If that starts, I can't be in for that number. But right now, I think I'm comfortable with where he is.
I am too. And I think that the other thing that makes it be more comfy is what you're saying about how he could be tight end 4 when we get to August and September. This is the time to strike.
That feels like profit. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Tucker Kraft was catching passes from Malik Willis for a few games last year, and that'll be the segue here. The new Miami Dolphins quarterback, Malik Willis, is expected to be the centerpiece of the Dolphins offense, according to former Packers front office exec John Eric Sullivan, who's now the new GM in Miami. The quote from John Eric Sullivan: "Bringing him in on a 3-year deal was very important to us. It's going to give us the opportunity to put multiple draft classes around him and make some noise in free agency," end quote. This is huge, Drew, when it comes to Willis, because the process of what the Dolphins did after they signed Willis, they had already they let Tyreek Hill go, and then they traded Jalen Waddle. You have the cupboard is kind of bare at tight end, although Greg Dulcich is kind of being talked up by Sullivan there as well. You have Ollie Gordon, you have Devon Achane in the backfield, Jalen Wright as well. But as far as perimeter threats, as far as tight ends go, it's kind of bare right now. When you consider Malik Willis's price right now in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball tournament, I can tell you that you are paying quarterback 21 price 1105 price in this 20-round draft. When you talk about Malik Willis at this point, doesn't, and I've been saying this for a couple of weeks now, doesn't it seem like this is the time to buy on Willis? Because when we have the NFL draft go off 2 weeks from today, and then when we have these free agents that are still out there, Juwan Jennings, Stefon Diggs, players like this, that can be signed after the NFL draft with no stipulations on compensatory picks going forward, it seems to me on the surface that now is the time to draft Willis as your number 2 quarterback or your number 3 quarterback, because I think that Miami Dolphins receiver and tight end room is going to look radically different starting about 3 weeks from today.
I don't disagree. I think right now we're all very concerned about what they're putting around him, which is rightfully so. But I think you make an excellent point. There are still some guys out there that they could end up with on the roster, and certainly the draft could change things as well. I think the QB 21 price is wonderful, and I think that you make a good point that this is where you want to buy. And again, we get late into redraft season, and everyone starts to have narratives that they get excited about, and it changes ADP. I hope that doesn't happen with him, because I think right now this is the perfect this is what I love about these situations, because of all of the environment questions and the fact that, we haven't seen what Willis can really do on his own with a full season. And this staff, I get that we're calling it what, Green Bay South or whatever, and I'm hoping that matters for him. But we saw a really bad version of Malik Willis in Tennessee. The guy was just horrendous. And when I say that he wasn't good or horrendous or whatever, like, that might be understating it. Like, it was horrible. It was bad to watch. Now, I don't know which player he is. I leave that up to smarter people than me. But I don't think investing at QB 21 price is a bad idea, considering what we've seen recently, and also just considering the simple fact that the guy can run. And I know that sounds like simple fantasy analyst talk. Well, he's got a floor because of rushing, but look at QB 21. What are we really risking here?
Yeah,
like what is really the risk? Like that, I can't argue with anyone at that price. But on top of that, how can I argue? Somebody just said in the chat, "Where are the Natter days?"
That's
believe me, right?
Brian Drake.
That's Drake. That's the hustle. Hey, what's up, buddy?
Yeah,
my buddy Brian Drake. But I just think you're absolutely right. This is how you make the investment, and you hope now that you make the investment, and then you see that shoot up to like what, QB 15 or something when they make some additions. Because I don't really believe they're going into the season with Tutu Atwell. I mean, do you? I mean, I don't. No. That's not what's happening. So I just think you invest in a young player, and I say this so often on my show. Sometimes, and I make poker analogies, and so I'll make this brief. But a lot of times you get at a poker table and you're in a pot with somebody, and you just think to yourself, there's just no way that my hand is good here. The way that they're playing this hand, there's no way it's good. But then you're looking at the board and you're thinking, well, why isn't it good? Just because they're putting a lot of money in the pot? Sometimes you just have to turn your brain off and say, I don't know what the hell they're doing, but I got to call. So you call and they turn up some wacky hand and you're like, yeah, that's why I called, because you're doing wacky stuff over there. And I think this is the analogy here is this. I think at this point, you just make the investment in a young quarterback because it's unknown. You don't sit there and go, oh, I don't know. You do it because you don't know. Because if you knew, then he might be QB 9, because what if he's going to have 52 rushing yards a game? Like we don't, you make the investment because you don't know. And you certainly hope that you're going to get the version that we saw in Green Bay. They know what works with him and how to make him produce, rather than the version we saw in Tennessee. I think it's a fantastic bet at QB 21.
We don't have Devonta Smith on the rundown tonight, but I've been telling everybody to buy Devonta Smith right now, because worst case scenario, Drew, he's Devonta Smith, right?
Yeah.
But best case scenario, AJ Brown gets moved. All of a sudden, he's the number one quarterback or number one wide receiver in Philadelphia. Yeah. To equate this to Malik Willis, we know he can run, right? We know that he showed out that he was definitely not the worst passer in the world last year with Green Bay, and we know his receiver and pass catching room is bare right now. to me, when you are drafting him, you are drafting him at his floor. There is a probably more, it's definitely a non-zero chance. Some would argue that it's more than a 50% chance. I'll just say more than non-zero at this point, that we could be looking, we're on April 9th right now. We could be looking at a Dolphins team on May 9th that features Mekhi Lemon, Stefon Diggs, potentially David Njoku or somebody like that, or Max Clare, or whoever you want to add in. And it looks radically different. And the fact that you were investing so little right now is the time to echo what you said. Now is the time to draft Malik Willis. Whatever happens with the draft and free agency after the draft, we'll figure it out then. But whatever happens, it's going to be the same or higher for Willis as far as his ADP goes, which is now what makes it such a great time to draft.
And they're not going to have a short leash with him, right? I mean, they're not going to yank him after 3 weeks.
You heard what John Eric Sullivan said. Like this is a multi-year plan with him.
Yeah. So he's going to get the chance. And again, what are we risking in round 16 or whatever the hell? What are you risking? Like you're not going to get your wide receiver 7 at that point. Like just the risk is non-existent for a player that has the potential to finish as a QB1. I mean, bottom end 10 to 12, something like that. That's certainly within his range of outcomes.
Absolutely it is. It 100% is. We go from one polarizing quarterback to the other, and I know this might be a difficult conversation as we move to Minnesota for you, Drew. But the Vikings, reportedly, and this is dependent upon, I heard Jordan McNamara talking about this on a recent podcast where he kind of said, like, I think we know what the Vikings want to do as their starting quarterback this year based on what we heard in a press conference regarding the quarterback situation. Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk said they're unlikely to officially name a starting quarterback prior to training camp between Kyler Murray and between J.J. McCarthy. Florio also said that the competition is, quote, going to likely commence during preseason practices and games. Take me through, end quote, by the way. Take me through what you thought once you saw that the Vikings have inked Kyler Murray, and it would not be potentially J.J. McCarthy throwing to Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, Jones, and Mason. It was going to be Kyler Murray here. Your thought process is going to definitely shift the way people are thinking about Kyler Murray in fantasy drafts right now.
Oh boy, that's heavy stuff.
It is heavy.
Well, here's my problem. I'm not a Kyler Murray guy. 2 years ago, I was in on him for fantasy because I thought, okay, he's a year removed from the ACL and he's going to run again. I heard some disturbing stuff from some insiders who talked about the fact that Kyler Murray just doesn't want to run. Like he's telling the coaching staff, I don't want to run. I don't know how much truth there is to that. I tend to believe these inside sources don't just make stuff up. So I think where there's smoke, there's fire. I think that's how he sees himself. And that's okay because Kevin O'Connell, I think, will play to whatever Kyler Murray wants. And I think O'Connell's a good enough coach. Let me just put this out there to everyone listening. I'm fully in the bag for Kevin O'Connell. I think he's an incredible coach. I think he knows how to get the most out of his quarterbacks. And I think maybe they made a mistake with J.J. McCarthy, and that's what they're thinking. I heard a scout one time say that it's interesting that you do all this work and you spend all this time and you get a guy on your team, and then you could go into practice and you could find out 3 days into practice, like, we screwed up. This guy doesn't have it. And that's very possible that that's what the Vikings figured out halfway through the season. Like, we made a mistake here. Now, they're not going to come out and say that. They're not going to destroy J.J. McCarthy before they have a chance to really see it happen. Let me talk a little bit about football first, and then I'll get to the fantasy, I promise here. But one of the things that frustrates me about Kyler Murray, and it dovetails with the point that I was just talking about with the rushing issue, is that there are certain guys that you just, like, it jumps off the screen at you that this guy is just not a winner. And I hate saying that about somebody because I'm not sure that I'm right about this, but that's what they pay us for. Because I'm making a ton of money doing this show tonight. They're paying me to make this call. I'm just kidding, man. Just had to throw. But I get paid to make this call, and what I see, and I don't want to call him a loser. I think that's I hate saying stuff like that. He's just not, like, I look at J.J. McCarthy and I see winner, and I know that sounds dumb, but like, he had some truly atrocious moments last year as a quarterback. He looked awful. But then you look at his record and you look at what he did, even in the games when his stats weren't interesting. He made the plays he's supposed to make. He played within the structure of the offense, and he made some plays that you think to yourself, okay, this guy does know how to win. And I hate that. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm making the analysis, so why am I saying I hate it? But that's what I've come to believe. And it's one of those things that, again, I'll harken back to what I said before about Drake and I. Like, when we spend so much time watching football, I'm turning 50 years old next month. I've been doing this for 40 years. Mm-hmm. And you recognize things. And what jumps off the screen at me is that McCarthy's a winner and Murray's not. And so that part of it really complicates things for me. And I understand that Kevin O'Connell's smarter than me, and he's going to do what's best for his football team. And I believe that I would agree with Jordan McNamara. They know what they want to do. They want Kyler Murray to come in and take the reins. Now, will a smart coach like O'Connell be able to convince him, we need your legs and we need this to be part of what you do? We're going to roll you out. We're going to bootleg. We're going to use you 5 times a game on design runs. Like, if he's going to be accepting of all that, I think that we have ourselves a fantastic situation football-wise. Spinning that out to fantasy, which is what everyone's here for, I really believe that Kyler Murray is much better for the offensive production fantasy football-wise. Now, as much as I can't stand the guy as a quarterback, I just think he's just mid, as the kids would say. A 50-year-old sounds weird saying it, but he's just mid. He's a QB 16. Like, that's just what he is. And I think we figured that out. We spent a lot of time in the fantasy industry saying, well, if this could go, and if this could, and if this, like how long has he been in the league? Bro, he is what he is now. Like, he just is. However, I do believe that is a quarterback who can get the ball out to his receivers. And I think that rises the rising tide lifts all boats in this situation. I believe that Murray makes Jefferson and Addison and everybody better from a fantasy production standpoint. I don't know that translates on the field of football games and wins. So that concerns me long term. But I think for 2026, I think they're going to give it a go. And I think that means I'm happier about the pass catchers in the offense.
100% agree. And I'm with you where I don't know how good Murray will be from a fantasy aspect, Drew, but I do know that this is a boon for Jefferson, for Addison, for Hawkinson. How big of a boon, I don't know. But I know that they're much better off. Minnesota is definitely much better off with Kevin O'Connell sort of reshaping, remolding, doing whatever he needs to do to tweak Kyler Murray's game in order for Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson and these other guys to make sure that they're having good fantasy seasons this year. And I can't say that the same with McCarthy. Now, you could make the case with O'Connell, and I'm a believer in O'Connell like you are as far as what he's been able to do with quarterbacks. You can make the case that there's 2 cases to be made with McCarthy. One, he's a quasi rookie when all these other guys, O'Connell had all this tape and, with knowing what he needed to do for, guys like Nick Mullen and Darnold and so on and so forth, that he could shape these guys and to turn them into what he needed them to be. McCarthy, he just didn't have anything on him. Like, he sat out the first year of his career with the knee injury, and maybe he'll get it, maybe he won't. I don't know. And that's the second point about McCarthy. Maybe, as what you were saying, he is just a miss, and maybe Minnesota knows he's a miss, and they're keeping that information under wraps in Minnesota in order to at least keep his trade value stationary or increase his trade value if somebody like Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, or Stefanski or any of these other quarterback guys want to take a chance on trading for this player to rehab his value. I don't know. There's a lot that goes into it, but all I know is this: if Murray wins the quarterback 1 job in Minnesota, which I do think he will, this is good things for Jefferson and the rest of the pass catchers there. Now,
I'm sorry, I know we need to move on, but I just want to say one more quick thing. There is a long list of players, quarterbacks in particular, who end up having a renaissance because of the situation that they came into. And I think it's very possible that a lot of what we see out of Murray is the dysfunction of the Arizona Cardinals organization. So if that could change. And so I have my mind open to that idea. So like I said, I'm a notorious Murray hater, but I do think there's so many examples in the NFL of a guy falling into the right situation. All of a sudden they play well. Well, hell, Malik Willis is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
They play well, and you go, where did this come from? And so I'm open to there being a renaissance for Murray as well.
There is JJ Zacharyson always talks about the range of outcomes for players and for situations. It is well within the range of outcomes that Murray ends up recapturing some of the magic that Arizona hoped that they would see in his Cardinals tenure, and maybe he turns that into something big and magical in Minnesota. I'm very excited to see what happens with the Vikings.
Would you be shocked if he's QB8 at the end of the year?
Shocked is a strong word. I would be surprised if he's there. Yeah. I guess shocked. I can't say I would be shocked if he's QB8 or something like that.
Yeah.
Cam Ward, I don't believe is going to be QB8 this year, but let's talk about him. He's dealing with a shoulder. He's actually recovering from right shoulder surgery right now. Had an AC joint injury in the first half of the final regular season game for the Titans in 2025. He's been rehabbing the injury in Nashville with the Titans. The quote that we got from new head coach in Tennessee, Robert Saleh, he is in there. He is working with the trainers, working in the weight room. We are up to date. I'm not going to put a timetable or anything, but he is progressing really well, end quote. Drew, when you consider how good Cam Ward was the last quarter of the season last year, where he was throwing multiple touchdowns per game, knowing that Tennessee is going to have the opportunity to add a playmaker at 4, whether it's Jeremiah Love, Carnell Tate, or somebody like that. They already have Gunnar Helm, who I know a lot of smart people are on this year. Calvin Ridley is back. And like, I know that sounds like, oh, who cares about Calvin Ridley? But he's coming back to a wide receiver core that is not all that experienced with Aya Manor and Shamir DK and all these other guys. There are the weapons there with Tennessee, and they could add more in the draft. But when you consider the shoulder injury for Cam Ward, is this putting a damper at all on you drafting him as a backup quarterback or maybe as a number 3 quarterback in a best ball league?
Just a little bit, but I'm not super concerned about that either. I don't tend to think about shoulder injuries the same way, though I probably should. I don't tend to think of it the same way because it sure feels like that's one of those things that we'll be able to quantify a little bit better. I'm not concerned right now. Now, the closer we get into training camp, if we hear that there's other issues, but I understand we're trying to give actionable advice tonight. I'm not that concerned right now. Yeah. And you alluded to the fact that the last quarter of the season, really post-bye, it jumped out at me when I was looking at it earlier today. Once I got the show sheet, I said, I remember him being much better at the end of the year. Am I even right about that? And it sure was interesting. I ran this through one of my home leagues where we do 6-point per passing touchdown, so just keep that in mind. But post-bye, he was the QB 12. So he was a QB1 in 6-point passing leagues after the bye. So weeks 11 to 17, he had 5 of his 7 games. He had 2 touchdowns. 1 week he had 1 rushing touchdown, and then the other games were all 2 passing scores. So not numbers where you get super excited as a fantasy prospect, but also what more do you want to see from a rookie? I mean, this is exactly what we want to see. We want to see the progression, and you want to see that post-bye bump. And I think that there's no greater example of the post-bye rookie bump than what we saw with Cam Ward. I mean, he was so much better after he got that 2 weeks to look at everything and to take a breath and to slow things down. He was better. And I hope that the changing in the staff doesn't sort of blunt that progression that we saw. But I'm optimistic. And again, I'm not going to reach and overdraft him because
you don't have to.
Right. Yeah, that's the great part, number one. And number two, I get a little nervous about guys like Ward because I want to see a little bit of a rushing floor, which he's got very little. And guys that are just pure pocket passers when you're not in a 6-point passing TD league, they really got to have a kind of an outlier TD rate in order for me to care too much about him. So I'm not super over the moon about him, but I am definitely, I have my eyebrows raised about how he finished the season last year. It makes me hopeful that if they do the right things, they add a few pieces, we might see a guy that can crack the top 15.
I'm excited for Cam Ward. Again, I'm with you. I'm not overdrafting him, and I don't have to. He will be my quarterback 3 in a bunch of best ball leagues this year, undoubtedly. And knowing that the upside is probably going to outweigh the risk that I would be taking at a certain point with him. I don't know how much we can talk about this, and maybe there's nothing here, Drew, but I do want to go to Detroit here briefly. Isaac Tesla. A guy that the Lions gave up significant draft capital for to draft in the 3rd round. The coaching staff has been effusive in their praise about this guy. Dan Campbell, the head coach there, quote, "We really like Tesla. We feel he's taken off. You'd be hard-pressed to say that he didn't make the most growth of any rookie," end quote. I know that Jameson Williams' contract situation sort of got resolved. He got extended there. We know Amon-Ra St. Brown is the unquestioned number 1 tight end there. We'll get to Sam Laporta here in the next segment. But I want to get your feel on what you believe Tesla is in redraft leagues right now. Because certainly the Lions see something there. They see the potential there. But at the same time, he's kind of roadblocked behind guys like St. Brown and Gibbs and Williams and Laporta. Is this just a late round dart throw in best ball leagues at this point, or is there something more with Tesla, Drew?
No, I think it's the former. I think it's just a late round dart throw because I tend to go, certainly as a Football Guys staffer, I run to the projections that these guys are making this time of year. Mm-hmm. Guys like Jason Wood and some of those guys over Football Guys who they have a real strong finger on the pulse of what these offenses like to do, both tendency wise and coaching wise and all that stuff. And right now they're projecting, 55 targets, something like that. That would be a big bump to what he did last year, but not much of, it's not enough for us to care. Now, I do think he's a dart throw because of a couple different things. Number one, sometimes we can't predict the progression because we always, I think one of the blind spots that we have as fantasy analysts is seeing everything as being like a linear progression. Like, okay, well, he did this last year. He can certainly improve to this year. But sometimes there is a non-linear progression. Sometimes there's just an explosion. Like, we can't keep this guy off the field. And so there's a certain percentage that I reserve in my brain for that possibility. And so I'll go into a lot of redraft leagues and be like, okay, I'm an auction guy. So I'll say, all right, if it's my last roster spot and I got $3 left, I'm just going to make sure it's Tesla. That's what I want to do. Mm-hmm. But I'm not very excited about it, and I'm not going to worry about it too much. It's not going to be one of those things where I think to myself, I got to save $3 for this guy because I don't see the volume coming. I mean, you hit it right in your intro there, which is the roadblocks are just too much. I feel like absent an injury, it's not going to happen. Having said that, we know that stuff can happen, but I even go back to like, okay, well, what will it take? Just one, or is it going to take 2 injuries? Because I don't necessarily think that when you got St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Gibbs, Laporta coming back, and we'll talk about Laporta in a little bit. That makes me a little nervous anyway. But it definitely feels like if one of those guys got hurt, they would just spread them to the other guys, and it wouldn't necessarily come back to Tesla. So I don't know that I see a real good path. The path is kind of like this. And I don't like to have to ski between all the moguls just to hit it perfect. I just don't see it. So that's the volume there. It doesn't seem like it's going to be there. I would find it very surprising to see him come up with north of 40 catches this year.
I know Dave Kluge, your colleague at Football Guys, was talking about the meme last year with Bijan Robinson versus Tyler Algier, where they're comparing the pass to touchdowns for them, where Bijan Robinson was this weird twisty path with all these obstacles in the way, and Algier was just this straightforward path. It's kind of like that's what we're looking at with Tesla in Detroit. Yeah. One other thing I wanted to bring up, and I noticed you were posting on X about this within the last couple of weeks. And I'll set you up for this in this regard. Trent McDuffie, the former corner for the Chiefs, was traded to the Rams about a month ago in exchange for that extra that extra first-round draft choice that the Rams got from the Falcons this past year, a 5th rounder and a 6th rounder this year as well, and a 2027 third-round pick. You made the point that while the Rams defense obviously got better, the Chiefs defense got worse. And this could mean big things for Patrick Mahomes in the passing offense in Kansas City.
Yeah. And I don't want to be, I've heard a lot of conversations about this in the past about who really benefits from having a bad defense and that kind of thing. So I don't want to be overboard on this, but I do think it matters. And it's somebody, so I've got a home keeper league, and it's not like I don't like watching the Chiefs in general, but I've had Patrick Mahomes on my team since he was a rookie. I've watched every single Patrick Mahomes snap since he came into the league. It definitely matters. That season where he had 50 touchdowns, like, it definitely matters what their defense looks like. And they've had such a good defense, and particularly at home, they get, and again, don't come at me with home road splits. I didn't look that up. My point is, when you watch these guys on a Sunday afternoon, you think to yourself, God, this offense is not playing very well. And yet they're up 13-6, and it kind of doesn't matter. And so this is anecdotal, but I also think that in the end, when you're in the fourth quarter and you're down 2 scores because your defense is so bad and your offense hasn't been good for 3 quarters, that stuff matters. It really does for fantasy football. I'll come back to the experience factor, which is just when I watch these games every Sunday, you see this stuff happen. So that I don't want to lean into that too much, just because I think there's also a way to overcount losing those 2 guys. I mean, there's a reason the Chiefs let those guys go, and it's not as if the Chiefs were sitting there like, oh, there's just nothing we can do about this. Like, I think the Chiefs see the writing on the wall, which is they got to pay certain guys. They can't pay everybody. Let's get some value now. So I don't think it's trivial what they did, but I also don't want to lean into it so much that I overstate how it's going to affect the offense. But bottom line, I said a lot of stuff, but bottom line is, I think it matters. They did sign a free agent corner, and I can't remember who they signed. I think they're going to be okay on defense, but I do think if they give up 22 a game versus 19, like this ends up mattering in the end for fantasy, even if it's only a 10% bump or 12% or whatever the case may be. I think it will matter.
Khair Elam was a first-round pick in 2022. He was signed 1 week ago today by the Kansas City Chiefs. They also added Kader Kahu to their secondary. And if you look back at what the Chiefs have done, Drew, typically they don't like to pay corners when it comes up. This is just, they seem to cycle through them, and they'll allocate those funds elsewhere. Seems to have worked pretty good, given that they got to 3 Super Bowls within the last 4 years. But it remains to be seen what happens this year for sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to watch the defense. It could be that they'll be 85% as good. And if that's the case, then they can still win a lot of games because they got to pay people on offense.
And they paid somebody on offense in Kenneth Walker. So the running back, they definitely got upgraded for Kansas City. The first hour has flown by here. I've learned so much. I know the viewers have too. Drew Davenport from Footballguys, criminal defense attorney to the stars, joining us on FFPC Insider Access tonight at Drew Davenport FF on X. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, let's get into this Footballguys staff mock draft that Drew participated in. He was in the 9 spot. We're going to talk about, speaking of Kansas City, we're going to talk about his selection of Rashee Rice, some other receivers, including but not limited to Jalen Waddle. We'll get back into Sam Laporta as well. You're watching FFPC Insider Access. I'm Eric Balkman. He's Drew Davenport. We'll be back right after this. The FFPC Baby Gorilla is live right now, ladies and gentlemen. Check it out. $125 entry fee will get you eligible for a $100,000 grand prize. Don't forget about its big brother, the FFPC Big Gorilla, $1 million grand prize, $350 to get in on that. And you can also take advantage of the 7 Bananas promotion. Tommy Heron, longtime FFPC veteran, just won a free $125 best ball tournament entry because he got the 7 pick randomly twice in a row. We will continue escalating those prizes up to a main event entry, up to a $10,000 high society entry, up to a $50,000 jungle safari for 4 if you're able to get that pick 5 times in a row. We had somebody come close last year with 4 times in a row. That was very exciting. MyFFPC.com is where to register for that. And then, of course, Dynasty and Empire Dynasty Orphans. $1, sometimes less than $1 to pick up those Dynasty Orphans right now. We are under 500 orphan teams available right now. So make sure you are taking advantage. Don't be a wish I had. Get in and play fantasy football year-round with the FFPC, with the Dynasty Orphans available right now at myffpc.com. We are back live here on FFPC Insider Access. My good buddy, Drew Davenport, on behalf of Footballguys.com, joining me tonight at Drew Davenport FF on the X. Of course, you know him. And by the way, Drew, I should pump up your podcast here. You have the auction, like the definitive auction fantasy football podcast that airs like during drafting season, right?
Yeah. So we always start in early June and we go to the end of August, and I like to think it's the best show out there for auction content, because one of the things that we have a problem with when it comes to auction content is really it becomes we spring off of a regular snake draft content and we kind of like build on that. And I just think that's problematic. It's such a different way of drafting. You really should be talking about auctions over here and redraft snake over here. And they really shouldn't collide that much. So that's what I try to do on my show.
I think there's a lot of people that draft in high stakes auctions with the FFPC, excuse me, every year, Drew. What do you think, like, regardless of if they're drafting in, high stakes leagues or what have you, what do you think is the biggest misconception when it comes to participating in auctions that people do, maybe the biggest mistake that people make?
I think the biggest mistake people make, and if you're a follower of mine, you've heard this for 6 years now, so I'm sure your eyes are going to glaze over and you're going to tune out here for a second. But Eric, I think the biggest problem that people have is that they don't define where they're going in the draft early enough in the draft, is that they kind of sit there and they become passengers to the draft. And they're just like, oh, I like that guy. And they start bidding, and like, there's no real, you're kind of just like bumping into walls. There's really no focus of like, how am I going to take this draft and go one, or take this auction, go one way or the other. And so I think that comes from preparation. Like, hey, what am I going to do early to set myself up for how I'm going to play it in the middle? Because you have to set yourself up to say, okay, well, I want to go after a premium tight end. Well, you got to know that early. And if you don't know that early, it's going to affect you in the middle. All of a sudden, you're going to be sitting there with this money like, I was going to spend it on a tight end. Now all the wide receivers are gone. You just end up like kind of just bumping around, not really having a purpose. So having that focus and focusing on that as early as you can with your first couple nominations, that's always the mistake I think people make.
Yeah, it's something to be watching out for as we get closer and closer to draft season. If you are participating in any auction drafts, check out the auction brief available anywhere you get your podcast, hosted by the incomparable Drew Davenport. Let's talk about the Football Guys mock draft that you just did. This was a bit like 2 days ago, 3 days ago. I mean, it's still pretty fresh, Drew.
Yeah.
This was, I mean, my God, you had Adam Hutchinson, Dave Kluge, Bob Harris, Jake Bryant was in this draft, Joey Wright, Jeff Bell. I mean, the list goes on and on. It was a bunch of heavy hitters with football guys. You drew the 9 spot in this draft, and I want to ask you about a few picks that you made in this. Now, just so everybody's aware, this was full PPR, right?
It was half PPR.
Half PPR. Okay.
Yep.
Half PPR on this. You end up going with, you kick off your draft with CeeDee Lamb, Drake London, and where a lot of people would think you go, oh, maybe you go running back in the 3rd round. You did not. You go Rashee Rice at the 309, and this leads into the conversation I wanted to have with you, was how right you were about how the NFL ended up ruling on Rice. I believe this draft took place after the NFL had come out and said, that they're not pursuing any kind of suspension or anything with Rice, and that he was, sort of quote unquote scot-free as far as fantasy drafters go in 2026. Am I getting the timeline right here when you picked Rashee Rice as your 309 pick as your 3rd wide receiver in this draft?
Yeah, you're getting the timeline right. And I think you mentioned this room is loaded. It's all Football Guys staffers. Everybody knows what they're doing. This was not an auction. This is a snake. And so I actually feel a little bit out of my depth when I'm in snakes very often. I do maybe 2 a year. And I just don't spend a lot of time mocking or doing anything like that. It's just not that interesting to me anymore. But I wanted to jump in with these guys because it certainly helps me define what I'm thinking about players. I love doing drafts this time of year. Not auctions, just drafts, just to see where everybody's going, what people are thinking, guys that are going too high, that kind of thing. I'm not sure the room, as much praise as I gave them just now, I'm not sure the room had really thought about it a lot yet. Said, hey, Rice should be going here, because I feel like late 3rd is a really nice value. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like that's a really strong value. Now he's my wide receiver 3, but I could see very easily in the 3rd round, if he's your wide receiver 2, like, you got to feel great about that.
Yeah.
My opinion on the Rice thing that you were talking about before, the problem is this is a difficult thing to swallow for just 2026, because yes, I'm correct in that the civil suit's not going to have any effect on his 2026 season. So I'm happy I got that right. The other side of the coin is that he continues to show poor decision making. And I'm not saying that all the stuff in the civil allegations is true. In fact, doing my job as for 24 years and 21 as a public defender, you find out that most of the cases are somewhere in the middle. Like, I don't believe that nothing happened here with him and this girl. And let me just say, I don't want to get sued, so I'll just put this out there as the lawyers speak. These are all my opinions. I don't have any inside knowledge, and purely my guesses and educated guesses about what's going on. I don't think nothing happened here. And I also don't think it was probably as bad as she said it was. Having said that, talking about degrees of domestic violence kind of makes me feel gross. There are degrees, but it's kind of gross because it's all awful. And whatever he may have done or not done is terrible based on the allegations that I read in the complaint. It's not good. So this is all leading up to saying, I love the value at the end of the 3rd round with Rice, but that comes with risk. And it has nothing to do with this current civil case. It has to do with the guy can't stop making bad decisions. Like I'll go back to the liar. Stop breaking the law, asshole. Like, stop making the news for dumb stuff. And domestic violence isn't dumb, but like, stop making dumb decisions. Racing your car and whatever physical may have happened with this woman and whatever. Like, stop it. Just stop. Stay in your house. Watch film, have your buddies over, and hang out, but stop going out and doing dumb stuff. So I can never discount that factor, because how comfortable are you ever going to feel with Rashee Rice on your team, redraft or dynasty, either one, because week 4 could come up and, they have a week 5 bye. I don't know what their bye is. My point is, they have a week 5 bye and they go, oh yeah, by the way, he was out drinking and driving and hit somebody. And it's like, would you be shocked if that was the news? No, not at all, because this guy is officially in the Tyreek Hill zone. We used to call it the Mike Tyson zone for people who are old enough to remember. But he's in the Tyreek Hill zone. He's out there doing knucklehead stuff all the time. So I think it's a great pick in a vacuum.
As of right now.
Right now. And also because I can just sit here and be like, hey, what a great pick, but it's a mock, so I don't have to live with it.
Right.
I would think about it much harder if I had to live with the pick for the rest of the year. So it's just, he's a risky player. And what I said in my thread a month ago, whatever it was, I don't think he's getting in trouble this year for this, but he's a toxic fantasy asset. Until I see proof, there are things that we see that you can tell somebody has really grasped what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
You do this long enough that you can tell guys have either bought into like the rehabilitation part of it, or they bought into like, hey, I've been an idiot. They'll say things that make you go, oh yeah, he gets it. And this isn't always stuff that you're going to pick up on as a layperson, because I've seen this for 20 plus years. And I haven't heard those things yet. So if I hear those things, great. And then I'm all in and I'm going to alert everybody to that. But right now I haven't heard that. And it's the same thing. Like I said, he's in the Tyreek Hill zone because I've never heard from Hill anything that's made me think that he's changed his behavior off the field whatsoever. And I don't think Rice has either. So he's a risky pick regardless.
You make a great point, Drew, with all these people, dynasty owners of Rashee Rice, thinking that they dodged the bullet, thinking that they can take this sigh of relief, right? That they're going to be good to go with Rashee Rice for 2026 and going forward. But I didn't even consider this until you brought it up. That doesn't mean that he will not make poor decisions going forward, and cost you, right? Because what do they always say? The best prediction of future behavior is past behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Rashee Rice doesn't have a great track record when it comes to that. Last thing I'll ask you about Rice, because I know like you had that thread going on at Drew Davenport FF, which is at the bottom of the screen right now. People can follow you for this kind of stuff. Was there anything, or was there something significant that when you were following this from the outside, and we should make everybody know that you're not like an insider into this case at all, but you are an experienced criminal defense attorney. Was there anything that you saw in this that you're like, you know what? I don't think that this is going to affect them for 2026 or maybe even beyond, so that if this happens in the future, God forbid, if this happens in the future with Rice or somebody else, that we can kind of like look at some of the signs here that happened in that specific case and draw back to the Rice case and say, okay, well, this is the same, this is different. Was there anything that like stood out to you as far as what made you feel like you knew what was going to happen in this case?
There's two things I'm paying attention to first and foremost that everyone should look at. Number one, and this sounds super simple, but it's the first thing I look at. Is it civil? Is it criminal? Mm-hmm. Civil has a different burden of proof. It allows somebody to just file a civil suit and say whatever. I could file a civil suit against you tomorrow and be like, Eric told me that I was the president of the United States and he was wrong. And like, I could just throw whatever the hell I want to put in there and accuse you of something that has very little relationship to the truth. So is it civil or is it criminal? Did the police force, I know that there have been prior, I believe, I shouldn't say I know, I believe there have been prior contacts with the police as it relates to this victim. And so that's one thing that instantly pops up is like, okay, if there have been prior incidents or reports and there was no action taken, that's a big one. So it comes down to, was this filed criminally or was it filed civilly? And if it's civil, you're almost never going to get the NFL to care. And one of the big cases I always relate it back to is the Antonio Brown case. He was sued multiple times for allegations of sexual assault. And again, we don't have to judge the veracity of those claims, but I don't think that multiple women come forward and accuse him of doing these weird things related to sexual assault. I don't think that it just had no truth. I think that the NFL just realizes we have to have a bright line. And that bright line is 99.5% of the time is going to be, if this is a civil case, we're just not going to do anything here. And the other thing about it is the timetable for civil cases is so extended that you can look at it and say, okay, well, she filed it in March. This ain't happening this year. They have their first court date in August. If that tells you anything. So they're not doing anything on this case for 2 years. Now that's number one, civil or criminal, because the NFL just isn't going to pay attention to civil. I mean, Dalvin Cook had a case going on. There was some nasty stuff, and apparently some stuff on video about what he might have done. And this was related to domestic violence. The NFL ignored it. Okay, I covered that case for months because there was some nasty stuff alleged, and there was some stuff flying back and forth between these two camps that was not good. And the NFL just didn't even comment on it. Like, that's wild to me, because that to me tells me their rubric is, we don't care about you slinging mud back and forth with civil cases. It's just not going to matter to us. So that's number one. The number two thing is timing of the incident. So I want to be super clear when I say that just because a woman waits to bring this stuff up does not mean it's not true. Okay. Yeah. Coming forward is difficult, and it can take years. And whether it takes 10 years or 3 months or 30 years, the truth of the matter is not affected by the timing. However, things become stale when the timing is off. And what I mean by that is, the longer you wait to come forward, the more stuff like videos that may have existed, or text messages, or recollections of the incident. Like, maybe this woman says to her friend, and these like we talk about contemporaneous conversations. So contemporaneous conversations would be, hey, I called my friend when I left his house after he just beat me up, and I told her this is what happened. Well, if there's no record of that, then what she said to her friend and what the friend remembers, those are going to be difficult things to remember. Yeah. Like, Eric, do you remember what you did last Friday? Like, no. You'd have to think to yourself, like, I don't know. Like, how is she going to remember a year or 2 years later? I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying the stuff becomes stale and becomes harder to prove. Yeah. So what the NFL did when they did their own investigation was look into this stuff and say, what can we figure out that's going to be, we're going to be able to rest our, like placing him on the exempt, or saying he violated the personal conduct policy. What are we going to be able to really have as a rock solid foundation to say he deserves this punishment that's not going to be blown up by the NFLPA if he gets suspended for a civil case? And they just decided, nah, there's not enough here. And I think part of that is the age of the case. So those are the two major factors. God, I'm running my mouth. I'm sorry.
No, this is great stuff. This is great. I guarantee you. So, by the way, and by this has propped up a new question. I know this isn't fantasy football, but our good buddy Derek Greer chiming in on YouTube right now, watching us. He wants to know what you think about the James Pierce Jr. case going on in Atlanta right now. Drew, this is a situation where he did not report to OTAs. No surprise there, as he's got other stuff going on in his life. Pierce Jr. was, I believe, the player the Falcons selected with that Rams pick that they traded back into the first round last year. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this or any kind of insight on what you think is going on there with Pierce.
Yeah, I'll be brief on this one because I don't have as much of a working knowledge of the case. What I do know is two things that concern me greatly. Number one is that there were allegations about this stuff in his past.
Yeah.
And those allegations were significant also. They weren't just like, hey, he had an argument on campus with a woman and everyone saw it. Like, there's significant history here that concerns me. Also, the allegations in this particular case are pretty gnarly. Like, they're not small things. And I think they dropped one of the felonies. I think it might have been the assault on a police officer, maybe, that they might have dropped. But regardless of, I can't remember which it was. I could look that stuff up, but just off the cuff here, what I'll say is those allegations have a significantly higher threshold for the NFL to be able to ignore. So the NFL, in order to ignore this stuff, would have to get over a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And also, we're talking about, again, civil versus criminal. This stuff has come down to criminal, and it's come down as felonious. And if we go back to the Antonio Brown case, he had all these civil allegations pending. They didn't do a damn thing. And then as soon as he pled to a felony, bang, 8 games. So we have to keep in mind that these felonies they're a big deal. The allegations are a big deal. Pierce is in a lot of trouble. If you're an IDP guy or IDP Dynasty or whatever, I know we're talking to a small subset here, but Pierce is in a bad situation right now.
Yeah, and it's not great for Atlanta either when you consider what they soaked into
Yep.
drafting him last year as well. Getting back to this draft here, Drew, and we'll definitely get back to the legalese here in just a couple of minutes. Travis Etienne is your selection after Rashee Rice. It's kind of interesting what's going on in New Orleans. It seems like Kamara is going to be a part of this team in 2026. How concerned are you about him eating into Travis Etienne? If I said Etienne, I apologize to the Etienne family. Travis Etienne, how concerned are you about Kamara eating into maybe his third down workload in New Orleans this season?
Yeah, I'm concerned, and I'm not even going to try to say the name because I'm not even exactly sure. People are saying Achane like it's the running back, but I think you got it right, Achane.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is, so I didn't love this pick. This is one of my least favorite picks in this mock. A couple of things happened that led me there, unfortunately. And for people who aren't looking at the board, I went Lamb, and then I went Drake London, and then I went Rashee Rice. So I had 3 receivers starting out. Feel great about that because the format was 2 wide receivers and 2 flex. Mm-hmm. So I can run those 3 guys out. But I just didn't feel like I could wait any longer at running back. And the reason this happened to me was when I took London in the second round, I thought I was going to get one of the 5 running backs that were all taken around the wrap. You know, Hampton, HN, all these guys that went on that 1-2 wrap before it got back to me. Literally, I was going to take one of those 5 guys, and all 5 of them went before it got back to me. And I said, okay.
It just for the viewers, Drew. Cook, Kenneth Walker, Achane, Hampton, Chase Brown. Those were the picks that went, and then it was up to you at that point. So the last 5 picks were all running backs.
Yeah, and that was frustrating because I thought I'd get one of those guys, and then I would be set up just to kind of do best player available from there. But I said I'm not gonna force this because I didn't like the running backs where I was. So I said, let me just go London. So that leads to the HM pick there after I had gone 3 straight wide receivers to start. So I don't love him as my RB1. And to answer your question, I am concerned about the Kamara thing. I also believe there's a little bit of smoke they're blowing there in New Orleans because we saw in the last 2 seasons the efficiency drop off for Kamara there. And I think it's a pretty significant problem and one they wanted to address, which they did. It would not shock me if Kamara isn't even on the team come week 1. But I also, as we sit here right now, I'm certainly concerned. Would I like a better RB1? Absolutely. But I felt like that was the perfect time for him because there was a nice little cliff there where I realized, okay, this is perfect for my RB1. And then I can kind of forget about it because I never worry about my RB2. That's a guy who can pull off the wire any week. So I was like, all right, this is a perfect spot for my RB1 now that I'm set up with a receiver. But I'm concerned. I am.
Did you, Drew, feel like because when you took Etienne, Breece Hall and Javonte Williams went after the Rashee Rice pick, would you have taken Hall or Williams over Etienne at that point had they both had they been available?
Yeah, I'd take either one of them. But when I went Rice, it was just because I don't care enough about those 2 guys to take them over Rice.
I got it.
And one of the things that people, I get the bad feelings around Rice, which I just spent 5 minutes outlining. But also when the guy's on the field, man, he just, he came on the field in week 7. He gets hurt at the end of the season, but from weeks 7 to 15, he was the wide receiver 2 in PPR. He was the wide receiver 8 in points per game. So we're talking about a top 8 wide receiver averaging 18.8 points a game in those from week 7 to 15. And that would have made him season long the number 4 wide receiver in full PPR. So I think it's easy to forget because they had kind of a weird end of the year where he gets the concussion and they had the backup quarterback in because of Mahomes getting hurt. And then he had the suspension at the beginning of the season. So people keep saying, well, he's never had this and he's never had that in a season. Why are we still talking? It's because of these splits. I mean, these splits, when you're running almost 19 points a game, you got to pay attention to a guy like that. So I felt like the uncertainty with those 2 running backs, it was just a no-brainer to take Rice there. And then when it comes around to the needing a running back, it wasn't perfect, but I was okay with him being my RB1 when I had those three receivers to start.
They paid him a lot of money. And certainly they want to utilize him there. So there is a lot to like about Etienne, especially when you consider that amazing Derek Gray was commenting on how great that start was. Lamb, London, Rice. That's fantastic. I think this was interesting as well. And maybe less interesting to FFPC and fantasy football drafters out there. You had the opportunity to take any Broncos receiver you wanted at the 509. Not saying that you were locked into taking a Broncos receiver, but you did take Waddle there. And this was roughly about a round and a half before Sutton went. Does that seem right to you? I mean, obviously you believe Waddle's the number one receiver in Denver, but I want to kind of flesh this out a little bit more with you as far as what you deem the disparity is between Waddle and Sutton in 2026.
So I believe Sutton's been miscast a little bit as a wide receiver one. What's funny is I love Sutton. And I actually, my last show of the year last year, I talked about how Sutton was just too cheap and that he should just be your wide receiver 3 on every auction squad and just forget about it because he's perfect, because he's so cheap and because he's going to outproduce that number. So I'm a Sutton guy. But when it came down to it and I'm staring at the board, I'm thinking Waddle was a pick with Tua Tagovailoa. Sometimes, he crept up into the second round a few years ago, but he's certainly third, fourth round pick for most of his career playing in that offense. When he gets a better quarterback with a stronger arm and a stronger offensive mind, and now I can get him in, what did I get him, 6th or 5th?
You got Waddle at the 509.
509. So I thought that's a no-brainer to me because the talent that he has and the explosiveness he has, Sean Payton's going to know how to use that. And I love the pairing with Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix is a little bit overrated as a passer, but I don't care because I think that I believe in the 5th round, that's a no-brainer. And the difference between Waddle and Sutton is I believe that Waddle is not the same kind of guy who can – Sutton's a guy that can frustrate you because he can disappear and he can be dependent on game planning for that week. But I think Waddle instantly becomes the most talented and explosive wide receiver in the room when he walks into the room. So I'm going to take that chance ahead of Sutton.
Yeah, and it makes sense too. I mean, again, you already had 3 receivers on this team. You're taking Waddle as your 4th guy, who you can start every week under this format as well.
Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense for me to continue the Broncos conversation, which I know your colleague Cecil Lammy would love. Drew, J.K. Dobbins at the 709, I think, is interesting when you consider, well, maybe it's less interesting this year because we kind of saw what the Harvey Dobbins dynamic was last year. Do you imagine anything different this year when you consider how much money, surprisingly, in my opinion, that Denver committed to J.K. Dobbins coming back to the Broncos in 2026?
I know the book on Dobbins, and I'll quote myself here about the fact that we know who people are at this point in their career. We know who he is. I know that if you get on Twitter and you use his name, he's going to have something to say to you if you call him injury prone. Right, yes. I don't necessarily know that the guy is injury prone. I know that sounds weird looking at his history, but there have been a lot of just things that happen to him that can happen to any football player. It's bad luck. And so I'm not saying he's not a guy that I'm concerned about, but getting him where I got him, and also the fact that I believe Harvey went significantly higher, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he did.
And I think that's wild. And I'm not saying that Harvey can't have more value. And certainly the pass catching and half PPR and PPR formats is something you got to weigh. One of the things that stuck out to me last year when I was watching Denver was that you could count on Dobbins' usage. You knew what his usage was going to be. And I don't see that changing. And one of the things I like about Dobbins is, and certainly I talk about this in auctions all the time, there is a tendency for people to just kind of forget like how good somebody was because they got hurt at the end of the year. It depends on what the injury was. Now, in Dobbins' situation, his injury isn't something I'm concerned at all about for 2026 because it was just, I believe, a high ankle. Or maybe a foot sprain. I can't remember which one it was, but point being, it's not a lingering injury. It was just something you couldn't get over by the end of the year. And so I'm not worried about the injury issue. And I shouldn't say that I'm not worried about him getting injured in 2026, but him as an RB2 that late and that far behind Harvey, it's for me, it was a no-brainer. In fact, I'm sitting there, it was at 7 that I took him, and I'm thinking to myself,
you grabbed Dobbins at the 709, Harvey went at the 408.
Oh boy. And see, I think that's wild. 3-round difference. We know that they're going to hit. One of the things that bothered me last year, there were some leagues where I needed a running back and I was exploring some trades for Dobbins. I noticed that there's going to be some TD dependency there. So I totally get that. But I don't care if that's my RB2. I'm not relying on that. And he's certainly going to get the touches, and they certainly know what he is and know what they want from him. He's one of the least risky players, even though I get the injury stuff. Like, let's not confuse my point here. He's one of the least risky players when it comes to offense, scheme, usage. Like, we know exactly what we're getting here.
Yeah.
And I think he's a no-brainer as an RB2 that late.
I think 709 for Dobbins makes perfect sense. That should be a nice little value for you there. I want to bring up, and people who have been watching my shows over the last several months, I've been very concerned about Sam Laporta. I always say this, Drew, nobody ever said they used to have a bad back. And the Laporta thing kind of caught me off guard last season, right? When it comes to, he got hurt this game. Oh, he's going to be on IR. Oh, it's going to be a long shot for him to return this season. And I'm like, what? Where did this come from? I think it's muted a little bit here. And I think at the 804, which is where you got Laporta here, it makes a whole lot of sense. You're not investing significant draft capital into this player, but I have to ask you, do you feel like you're at all, like, what's your level of concern with Laporta and his back this upcoming season, knowing that they do have St. Brown and Jamison Williams and Tesla and all these other guys, Jahmyr Gibbs or whatever, all these other guys that can carry the load if Laporta is unable to get it done like he was at the end of last season, and all those guys shined?
I have a pretty healthy level of concern. And like you said, the issue, and again, I'm listening to these Twitter doctors that are talking about it. There's not a, we can't sit here and say he's definitely going to be fine for this year. I think that's the major problem, is that if we're sitting here in April and we're not necessarily sure, that's a big red flag. So that may be, it's easily my most risky pick. We only went through 10 rounds, but It's easily my most risky pick. But I also felt like if you're looking at the board and what tight ends had already gone and who was already left, I felt like that pick was easily the best tight end option at that point in the draft. That's how it felt to me.
Yeah.
And I really felt like I was going to get Tucker Kraft, like he was going to fall a little bit and I was going to snap him up. And then he went before I could get him. And so then I kind of just blew it off. And for me, I don't want to spend a lot of time in the middle rounds drafting tight ends. And when I say middle rounds, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever. So 8, part of the format here was, hey, try to get your quarterback and tight end. You don't have to, but try to for the draft. That felt easily like the best pick at that point to take that risk. And I remember having a conversation with JJ Zacharyson, I believe it was, who said that you really, as a fantasy manager, tend to overrate how important those picks are to the future success of your team. And he said, once you get past really round 4-ish, 5-ish, you're not impacting your overall team that much by trying to say, play it safer. So I don't think I want to go in and say, okay, well, I'm going to get a floor guy here. That doesn't do anything for me. Laporta's got the ability to be that high-end asset. And if that's the case, that's a no-brainer for me in the 8th round to take that shot. And we'll know if I need to dump him. If he gets into week 3 and he's just not even playing and he's struggling, he's on the injury, like, it's easy. That's an easy cut. An 8th round doesn't hurt me that much.
We have seen tight ends drafted outside the top 12 come to big time fruition in fantasy leagues over the last several years. So if Laporta is not getting it done, certainly there are other players that you can take advantage of. And to your point, guys like Juwan Johnson, Aronde Gadsden, these are the guys that went after Laporta. You could easily make the case that Laporta had the best ceiling. And honestly, in round 8, you should be drafting for ceiling at that point. Swing for the home runs, not the doubles. The last player I want to bring up that you had selected, it was the final round of this. It was 10-round draft. Juwan Jennings at the 10:04. This was just a case, at least I'm assuming, Drew, I don't want to put words in your mouth. This had to be a case of like, hey, I'm going to take Jennings here in the 10th round, but as soon as he signs with somebody, he's probably an 8th round pick.
Yeah, easily. And I think that Jennings, he's the kind of guy that I do think he benefited a little bit from the Shanahan system. And I think he benefited in some respects from the lack of target competition because of injuries at certain points. So I'm not sure he's a difference maker, but I'm also not sure that he won't be signed to be a pseudo wide receiver 1 somewhere. I think it's very possible. So I think that you make the perfect point, which is that in the 10th round, finding that upside is not always that easy. And I think he's a guy who could have 110 targets somewhere. And if that's the case, 10th round, that's a smash. I don't feel like he's a true alpha, and I don't feel like he's a true like a guy that I think is going to be a fantasy monster. Like we saw that 40-point game he had with San Francisco. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like he's I don't think he has the capability to go 85, 1,200, and 8 touchdowns. I don't think that's the guy. But I don't think in the 10th round it matters if that's the guy. I'm and there could be a perfect landing spot. Who knows? I mean, I don't know what some of these teams are doing that don't have wide receiver depth, right, why they're not after him. So maybe that should tell me more than I think it does. But I think 10th round, he's a no-brainer.
The full analysis of this draft can be found on the Footballguys Fantasy Football Show, anywhere you get your podcast. I listened to it already. Joey Wright and Dave Kluge, who both participated in this draft, very effusive in their praise for you, Drew, in this draft. What you did to recap Drew's draft here: Drake May at quarterback. The running backs are Etienne, Dobbins, and James Conner. Receivers are Lamb, London, Rice, Waddle, Juwan Jennings, and then, of course, Laporta at tight end. So check that out with the Footballguys Fantasy Football Show to learn more about that. I want to take our final break, Drew. When we come back, I want to talk Nakua. I want to talk Jordan Addison. I want to talk Diggs with you, and then we'll get into some of these rookies, especially from the national championship Indiana Hoosiers. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. He's Drew Davenport from Footballguys at Drew Davenport FF on X. I'm Eric Balkman. You're watching FFPC Insider Access. Don't go anywhere. We got a bunch more to get to right after this. FFPC Insider Access rolls on here on the 9th day of April. We are coming up on 2 weeks before the start of the NFL season. Don't forget about FFPC Dynasty Orphans, Empire Orphans, Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, Never Too Early Superflex Best Ball Tournament, Big Gorilla, Baby Gorilla, all available now at myffpc.com. That is myffpc.com. Joining me on the show tonight is Mr. Drew Davenport at Drew Davenport FF on the X, the criminal defense attorney, the best criminal defense attorney we've ever had on this show. And quite frankly, the worst criminal defense attorney we've ever had on the show as well. Good stuff from you tonight. And I want to pick your brain, Drew, on some of the stuff going on. And based on the conversation that we just had with Rashee Rice, knowing that Puka Nacua is dealing with a civil suit and not a criminal suit right now, perhaps that's the biggest alert or the biggest sounder, the biggest thing we need to take away from this as far as when we consider how high we're taking Nacua. I'm in a draft right now, a slow draft. I ended up taking him at the 1-0. God, I forget where I was drafting in this. I think it was like the 104, 105 in a league where you have to start 3 wide receivers. I didn't dock him a whole lot. Am I right not to dock Puka Nacua a whole lot? Your thoughts on him and what he's going on, or what's going on with him off the field right now?
Yeah, I think you're right not to dock him right now. This whole thing is hurting my heart because I love Puka, and he's been a part of some of my biggest fantasy wins in my entire career, and actually two of my titles that I consider to be two of my bigger titles that I've ever won. I won a three-peat on his back a couple years ago, which is my only three-peat of my fantasy career, and then I won my third auction. Kings Classic auction title on his back last year because everybody was a little bit concerned about Stafford. So I went ahead and jumped in with both feet, ended up with a deal in him in the auction, and he carried me. So this bothers me because I bought his jersey. Like I've been all in on Puka. What I'm a little bit concerned about is the statement that he's going to seek treatment. Mm-hmm. And the reason this concerns me is not because of what he's doing, because I think that's excellent. If you can make that choice to go do that, handle that, that's exactly what we want to see. And so I'm telling you that this concerns me, while the other side of my mouth, I'm saying that guys like Rashee Rice and Tyreek Hill need to say these things, and they haven't. So I give Puka a ton of credit for that. So let me just get that out of the way and say, I love when people come to these conclusions on their own, and they're not forced by a court or by the league to do that. So let me put that out there. But let me also say that if he feels like that's what he needs, then I think that's a signal that we have a bigger problem on our hands than maybe we thought. Because I don't think a lot of guys, what is he, 24? I don't know his age off the top of my head, but I don't think a lot of guys his age. I mean, I've got a case right now of a buddy who's got a son who's a senior in college at Ohio University. Mm-hmm. Okay. What does everyone in the world know about Ohio University? They like to party. And this guy's a senior, and he's going to be graduating in a month and a half. He gets a public intox ticket. I'm handling that for him, and he has to go in for this assessment. I promise this is going somewhere. He has to go in for an assessment, and the assessor says, "Hey, I think there's some problems here." And I keep telling the guy, like, "Look, you're a senior in college. That's what people do. They drink, and I understand that." So, as a 24-year-old, I just want to be like, "Hey, Puka, just chill, just stay at home." Just like I said with Rashee Rice. Like, don't be driving. I'm not saying he was driving, but don't be driving. Don't be doing dumb stuff when you're drinking. But it sounds to me like he has the problem where he can't figure that out. And so that means that there probably is a problem. If he can't handle like these situations, I mean, there's that video that came out where he's like passed out in the van. Now, Eric, I like to drink as much as the next guy. And if you see me at the expo, you know that. I go and I just rage for 3 days. I'm away from my family and it's a vacation and whatever. But the point is, I like to drink as much as the next guy. I've never gotten on a party bus and passed out. I've never done it in my 50 years on this earth. I've never done it as much as I like to drink. I don't black out. I don't go get behind the wheel blacked out and don't remember how I got home. Like, there are things that signal a problem. And so I'm not putting Puka Nacua in the Rashee Rice or Tyreek Hill zone. I'm not putting him there yet. I think that he's made a super mature decision to say, I need some help. So I think that's great. And I think that you can't dock him yet. Having said that, I use the word yet on purpose because there's some weird stuff around this, right? About the anti-Semitism and like biting this woman. Like, I'm not here to pronounce him as having done those things because I know his attorneys have come out and said, no, there were sober people here at this thing that never heard him say anything anti-Semitic. But there's been 2 instances that he's been accused of anti-Semitism in the last 3 months or 6 months. So, I mean, come on, Eric, how many times have you been accused of that? I mean, right. So it's like I don't think there's nothing to it, right? Like, I can't sit here and be like, they proved that he didn't say it. Proving a negative is difficult. But the point being, you can't, I feel like you can't just ignore this stuff. And so I'm elevating my risk level with him. I'm not ready to dock him yet and say, hey, he needs to be in the second round, or hey, you got to push him down. I think we're okay right now. And the fact that he said, I need some help, that's cool. I don't think he's going to have a problem for 2026 out of this civil case. I think the stuff that they've alleged is a lot more like Mickey Mouse stuff. Like, I know can't go around biting people. I get that. But again, there's degrees here, and the degrees are much lower than what is alleged in the Rashee Rice case. So just keep it in mind, keep it in the back of your mind, And keep in mind that the next time we see Nakua do something like this, then we have to be really concerned. Right now, my eyebrows are raised, but I'm not docking him yet.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And perhaps my eyebrows are more raised now than they were prior to you telling me this, because I think this is all good stuff to keep in mind. The next receiver I want to talk about is Jordan Addison. We found out roughly, I don't know, 2.5 months ago that the probable cause trespassing charges against Jordan Addison are not going to be filed. He is preparing for the filing of a civil claim arising from the alleged wrongful arrest. Addison's agent said from the start of everything that went on with him that he said he did not do anything wrong. There was no legal wrongdoing here. The full statement that we got in January: we are thrilled that the truth was finally revealed and this poor man's name was not besmirched any longer. I'm thankful we are able to bring this to light as quickly as possible. This is not the only run-in Addison has had with the law. Obviously, he had a DUI, which led to a suspension. The Vikings recently decided to extend a 5th-year option to Jordan Addison as well. I don't know if there's a whole lot of meat on the bone here, Drew, but you have wowed me before. Is this something that we need to be paying attention to as far as fantasy football goes?
Whoops, sorry, I was muted there.
Okay.
Again, I think that I'm going to put him in the same area as I put Puka right now, because there is enough off the field stuff, the smoke and fire. There just has to be fire where there's smoke. And I'm sorry, but you don't see somebody get in trouble this much. And it's all a misunderstanding every time he gets in trouble. That's just not the case. And I know that, I really nailed the stuff on Addison when he got the OVI. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of when it comes to this job is I knew that wasn't going to trial. And I kept saying it. This is not going to trial. He's going to have to take a deal, but they're in a difficult spot. The state is, because they can't really reduce it to something non-alcoholic because he passed out on the road. Like, this isn't something that is just like all a misunderstanding. And I don't know if you know Scott Frankel, who is he's tangential to the industry. He comes out to the expo every year. But the reason I bring him up is because he is a casino. I think he's a pit boss, maybe. But regardless, he's got a managerial position in a casino. And the one thing he said to me after Addison got in trouble was, most often the reason that they say they're going to file charges is they just want to get the guy out of the casino and they want to trespass him and say, just be gone. They don't have enough time to go around chasing every person for trespass charges that gets thrown out because they were drunk. And one of the things that I speculated on with my Addison thread, and I don't know if I'm breaking news here to anybody, but I actually spoke with his attorney after this happened. He DM'd me privately and said, hey, I like you. I like your work. I want you to be real careful with what you're saying about Jordan. Because when he came to us with the facts of the situation, it sounded pretty sketchy. And this guy had enough gravitas with me to say, look, we have these jobs where people lie to us all day, every day. And that's exactly what my job is. My job is people lie to my face all day. So I've gotten really good at picking up when they're lying and when they're not. And that's kind of what this guy alluded to. He said, look, we're always going to kind of roll our eyes when somebody comes to us and says, I didn't do this, because for 20 years I've been hearing I didn't do it, and 95% of the time there's some truth to the allegations. Yeah, I mean, that's the way the system works. And especially these days, a lot of times prosecutors don't even want to file unless they think they're a shoo-in to win the case. They just don't waste their time. Like, I don't think I'm going to win. They take their time on the cases, like, hey, I need to pick this fight or whatever. But long story short is, the attorney persuaded me that maybe there was some profiling going on here. And maybe there was a problem with the fact that he's got a lot of money and he's African-American, and they sort of went overboard with him. That could be the case. I don't know what he knows. He didn't tell me that stuff specifically, but he told me enough that I know that that was a concern. But I'm going to flip the coin here again and say, Eric, I've never been kicked out of a casino before.
Yeah.
And I've never been caught doing 140 on the highway. And I've never passed out in my car on the highway. There just is fire where there's smoke. And again, no matter how wrongful this casino was or whatever it was, I heard some both sides of the coin. He was trying to get into like an employee area, and like he couldn't be told. Like he just kept saying, "No, I'm not doing anything. I'm not leaving." And so there's two sides to this thing. I believe again that it's somewhere in the middle. But once again, it is a situation where I don't think there's a problem for 2026. But he's just a guy where you have to understand the risk. And I think that means there's a little bit of a discount there that you have to get before I'm going to want to be in on it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm glad this is great stuff, Drew, by the way. Like the bringing all this to life.
Glad to hear it.
This is changing the way that people are going to be drafting and handling Jordan Addison in dynasty leagues and best ball leagues and what have you. The last veteran I want to bring up, Stefon Diggs, facing felony strangulation, other criminal charges. He pled not guilty to this a couple of months ago. Misdemeanor assault and misdemeanor battery charges as well that involved him and his personal chef. I believe he was supposed to appear in court about a week ago. I don't know what the result of what that was, but Diggs' attorney denied the allegations or whatever. And I can't help but notice he is still unsigned after being released from the Patriots. Do you think, or how big of a deal do you think these charges that are weighing over him right now are the result of him still being unemployed by the NFL?
I think there's a big correlation there. First of all, you astutely have hit the nail on the head right away. There is a correlation there. And on top of that, I'm going to say that if we go back to when you asked me, well, what did you see about the Rice situation? You go back to the civil versus criminal, and immediately we have a problem because we've got criminal situation involved. And another thing that if you follow me and read my threads, is that I always point out that strangulation is a problem, okay? And I don't mean that from the standpoint like, well, no, duh, strangulation's bad, but strangulation leads to bigger problems. And I'll say it again, never had the need or the want or the desire to put my hands around a female's throat, okay, no matter how frustrated I was. There is a level to that. There is a hurdle in a person's brain when they do that. And again, not saying he's guilty, not at all, but I'm saying the allegation is bad enough, and the statistics come from the National Institute of Health, but essentially I think it's something like 7 times more likely to commit a homicide later after having allegations of strangulation earlier in a person's life. So this is terrible stuff. And so I'm going to sit here and say this. I think a couple things happened, and let me just tell you the story of how this could possibly have happened, while again issuing my caveat that this is my opinion and this is a story I'm telling about how it could have happened. But I really believe that what is going on here is there's a relationship there that may or may not have gone beyond employee-employer relationship. That seems likely. But also, I think that he was pulling an Antonio Brown here where he wasn't paying her. And she's had a decision like, what do I do now? Because he's not paying me. I doubt that she wanted to go the criminal route. Yeah. But she went that route because she said he's not paying attention to this. And then if the allegations are true that he assaulted her in the manner in which she suggested, that's serious enough that she said, okay, I've had enough. So the point is, I believe as well as teams are concerned enough about Diggs and how this is going to turn out that he's toxic right now. And I'll say the final conclusion to that would be that I wouldn't touch it at all unless we're talking about an 18th round pick. On top of that, I do think that there's a very good chance this gets resolved with a plea to like some sort of non-violent misdemeanor, or that it actually gets dismissed. I think that's very possible. So I'm not here to say that the hay is in the barn on the case at all, but I'm extremely concerned about the allegations. And on top of that, I would say that everyone else is too. So that lends credence to the opinion that teams have looked into this and they're worried enough that they're not gonna touch it. So again, bottom line on Diggs is I'm concerned. I also believe that it's quite possible middle of June we hear the case has been dismissed, or he's pled to a disorderly conduct or something like that, which means he paid her. And I don't mean paid her off like I'm going to pay her to lie, but hey, they finally settled up their business differences.
Yeah.
And she said, okay, I want to be done here. I don't want to be in the spotlight. I'm just going to get rid of my case because I got my money and we can go our separate ways. I think that's very possible, but I still think Diggs is this is a bad spot. It's a bad situation.
Bad spot right now. You mentioned middle of June. If this does happen where the parties kind of go their opposite ways, do you think it'd be a matter of days before he'd be signed, or are there still other issues that you think that would prevent him from being signed?
No, I think it'll come pretty quick. I think that if he resolves the case, and he has every incentive to do that as quickly as possible, I think that we could see him land with the team pretty quick. But again, keep in mind, he's not getting any younger, and taking on a problem is going to require a pretty small contract and a team that's pretty established that knows that they can handle this. And, that list is pretty short, in my opinion.
Which means the money would go down as well.
Yeah.
As far as what they have to pay him. So that's something to keep in mind. Great stuff about Diggs. I apologize. We have gone it's so much good stuff. I have to allow you to talk about your Hoosiers here. So I'm gonna lump it in sort of like four guys into one question. Mendoza, Cooper, who's probably going to be a first-round pick, Omar Cooper Jr., Elijah Surratt, who is right up there with all the leaders as far as pass catchers go on Indiana's championship team. And then we should talk about Kalen Black, a guy, quite frankly, I am not all that well-versed on, but I know he's getting some day three buzz. Can you give us your insight into these players, not only as a Hoosiers guy, Drew, but as a Dynasty fantasy football player and a fantasy football player in general, of what we can expect at the next level? Is there one guy that stands out more than the others?
This is a weird spot for me as an Indiana fan because I love these guys and I loved watching them. I'm not sure we have some all pros here, though. And I think that obviously Mendoza, who's going to be the overall number one, he's the most interesting, but let me end with him. Let me say that Kalen Black, I pay attention to the Footballguys rookie guide, and I have JJ Zacharysen's rookie guide, and nobody has him as somebody who's going to come to the NFL and make an impact right away. Having said that, he certainly has the makeup of like a Cam Scatabo type guy who plays bigger than his size, who plays angry and runs downhill and is just a very physical guy, even though, like I said, I don't think his size is prototypical for what you want. So I think there are reasons he is where he is. I'm not sure that I see a lot of success for him in the NFL. That's just my opinion. And again, I listen to people smarter than me for this stuff, and they tend to agree that he's not somebody that's going to make a big impact. But I can't certainly rule it out. And I think guys that have the mental makeup, and one of the things I would point out for Indiana players is that they have a certain mental makeup that I think allows them to be for us to have some more optimism for them, because there are reasons guys fail when we have all these metrics and these advanced analytics and all these things that we think about. One of the things that we can never quantify is what's up here and how that's going to translate to the NFL.
Yeah.
And I think when you play for Curt Cignetti and you have a certain mindset, I think that translates to the NFL well. So I'm not ruling it out with him. As far as the two receivers go, there's another thing that bugs me in the fantasy industry. I'm not a big dynasty guy. I'm in one league, and I certainly follow everyone who's smart in the dynasty community, and as well as the NFL draft analyst community. So I've got all this information swimming around in my head. But one thing that bothers me the most about this community is how we see guys produce in college, and then when it comes time to do NFL draft analysis, that kind of goes out the window sometimes. It's like it falls out of people's heads, and they think they're excited about Omar Cooper, but Elijah Surratt, it's like, yeah, whatever. Like Surratt, like whatever. Like, I get the differences, and I understand why people are that way, but Surratt was an incredible player last year, and he was the guy that they really leaned on in tough situations. I understand the problems, though, that both of them have with the profile, and that's contested catch rate and the fact that they relied so much on, say, back shoulder stuff and contested catches. So I get that those are problems for both of these guys. I love both of them as players in college. I'm not sure that I see a lot of NFL success for either one of them. I'm not that excited about either one of them in the NFL, but I think it's wild that Cooper's just taking this huge jump over Surratt. That stuff drives me nuts. It's the Matthew Golden thing from last year. I said this over and over. In fact, I traded Golden in my Dynasty league that I had him. He was a Devi player that I ended up, flipping for some assets because I just said, everybody says, oh, look at what he did in the combine and look at all this. It really comes down to run fast. Love him now. Like that's just, I kept saying, like, he ran fast. Wide receiver, is he wide receiver one now? Like, I'm just like, come on, people. Like, there's a reason he didn't command a high target share in his entire college career. And I say the same thing about these receivers. Like, they produced, but Surratt was the man. And I think Cooper was awesome. And I love Cooper. I don't know how they got flipped. But again, I don't see a whole ton of NFL relevance here. That's just my gloss on it. Finally, my boy Fernando. Let me just say this: I can't be objective about Fernando Mendoza. I just can't. But let me say this: my attempt at being objective is this: I don't see a top level NFL quarterback, but I do see an NFL starter.
Yeah.
And so that's my attempt to be objective. But I will say this: my non-objective take is you are drafting a player who, more than any other position, is the CEO of your football team. He's the guy that's the face of the organization. You're paying him hundreds of millions of dollars. You want to see certain things that don't show up on tape. That's a maturity, that's decision-making, that's desire, that's intelligence. All of these things Fernando Mendoza has in spades. He is an A-plus guy in all these categories. He always says the right thing, and everybody's like, oh, he's been coached. He's been media savvy. It's like, how many guys do you know that have been coached and they still can't do it? They can't. Right. So I think Mendoza has all of the intangible things you really want in an NFL quarterback. I'm excited to see if that can translate, because there's never been a guy that has done what he's done and then coming to the NFL with so much skepticism. I'm hoping he spits in the face of that skepticism and he turns out to be a great NFL player. I'm not sure that I believe he's going to be great, but I think he has the mental makeup to be a very good NFL quarterback. I hope that translates.
Think about the other things that he has too, Drew. I mean, Heisman Trophy winner. First team ever to win, to go 16-0 in a season. That was Mendoza as the quarterback of that team. And he did it with Indiana, a non-blue blood program in college football. A guy that, you look at his backstory, and certainly he's had some other stuff going on with his family over the course of his life, and he has handled it with aplomb. So that, say what you will about him and his perceived shortcomings on the field, there's a lot to like about him off the field, and there's a lot to like about what he's accomplished as far as collegiately speaking. So there's that as well. I'm excited to see what happens with Mendoza with Las Vegas, assuming it goes number 1 2 weeks from now, which I think is going to happen. Number 1 in our book, tonight and forever, as far as the criminal defense attorney, we want handling our stuff if we ever find ourselves run afoul, or at least to be accused to run afoul of the laws. Drew Davenport FF on X. Of course, you can check out his work at Footballguys. And Drew, I don't want to speak for you. June of this year, are we going to see the auction brief be fired back up on the podcast side of things?
Yeah, the first Thursday in June will be the first episode of the auction brief. But you can also hit me up on the Patreon, Fantasy Football Lawyer. And Drake and I might have something in the background percolating for the summer as well.
Oh, spicy. I love that. That's why you stick around for the whole show, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right.
Which is great. Drew, you have set a record. I think this was like the longest time anybody has ever gone from one appearance on FFPC Insider Access to the next one. I hope we don't break that record. I hope to have you on again very, very soon, because this was so much fun. Be good. Enjoy your Thursday night, and hopefully we'll do this again very, very soon, my friend. Keep up the great work at Footballguys.
Thanks. I appreciate you.
That is Drew Davenport, ladies and gentlemen, from footballguys.com, at Drew Davenport FF. Of course, the host of the Auction Brief podcast. You can check out all his work at footballguys.com. That is going to complete our show tonight. I want to thank Drew for hopping aboard. Don't forget FFPC Dynasty Empire Orphans, Dynasty Orphans, and Empire Dynasty Orphans available now at myffpc.com. Some for as little as $1, some for cheaper than $1. Check that out. The Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, Never Too Early Superflex Best Ball Tournament available now at myffpc.com. $40,000 and $10,000 grand prize at stake there. And the Big Gorilla, $1 million grand prize for just a $350 entry. The 7 Bananas promo is live. Early Rampage tournament is live. So you're basically getting in 2 tournaments for the price of 1 entry fee now with the Big Gorilla and the Early Rampage. And the Baby Gorilla available now for those of you who always want to play high stakes fantasy football. You can do so now at $125 entry to win $100,000 grand prize. myffpc.com. myffpc.com is where to go. We'll be back 7 o'clock next Thursday evening with player profiler and the FF Dynasty podcast contributor Jeremiah Retzlaff. Yeah, Coach Retzlaff making his debut on this show next week. 2 full hours. We're going to get heavy into the rookies next week. That's going to be a lot of fun. Don't miss it. FFPC High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour last night. Check it out on the socials in case you missed it, with 52-time Dynasty winner Jeff Jameson. The Road of his High Stakes Lowdown we had on Mike Stiavnicki on Tuesday night. You can check that out and watch it on demand when you want. And then tomorrow night, 10 o'clock, Friday night, FFPC High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour Extra Rep. Scott Hoyt, the 7-time FFPC League winner, will join me for a spirited discussion. That's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Be good. Enjoy your weekend. For Drew Davenport, I'm Eric Balkman. This has been FFPC Insider Access.